Hey kids. So the other day, McNeil says, "Hey, my battery is going dead frequently, and can you check it?" So he left his Honda Passport out, or Honda Pilot rather, out in the parking lot. Maybe 20 minutes later, I walked out to get it, and it barely started. I drove up onto the front of the shop there. And when I got there, right as I got there, it died. So I was gonna take the battery out anyways, put it in the battery tester, and before I did, I put the voltmeter on it, and it read 5 volts, which is amazing because in order to start the car, it'd have to have north of 11 volts at least to start the car, or at least in the neighborhood of 11 volts, because the computer won't fire up and unless it does. And so the reason it died is because the computer just shut off. It says I don't have enough I don't have enough voltage to keep running. Great. So I'm like, wow, something is stealing power from this battery in a hurry. So test the battery. The battery's fine. I went to hook it back up. Negative. Positive. Anyways, no. Oh, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I went to put the negative back on second, right? Like you're supposed to, like we teach you children to do. This one is already hooked back up, so that's cool. As I got about here, Mr. Groom, that's like an inch and a half, 2 inches away. That's correct. There was a hairy, nasty, goofy, boom spark. Not really a spark, friends. That is called an arc. Now, the amount of voltage that it would take to do that is, well, immense. In other words, it has to have so much. Like, well, it's only 12 volts. No, I get that. But there's a lot of current is running out of this thing to make that happen. Okay? Like, a lot. So, well, how much? What could be happening there? So, interesting. So, my first thought was, let's go to the fuse box. Clearly, it would have to be on a big fuse. So, I pulled some 30 amps one at a time and tried it. Nothing. And it has to be more than 30 amps for this to make this happen. So finally, I just manned up and shoved it down on there. And then I'm like, and so first of all, before I did that, I thought to myself, no, wait a minute. What are the only cables, the only wires on this car that are capable of handling, north of 30, significantly north of 30 amps for any length of time? And obviously, it was doing this before when he brought it in. It was doing this, and it hadn't like burned to the ground or blown a fuse. The only ones that are big enough to do that would be battery cables, here and here, where this goes down to this will go down to the frame or the engine, ground to the block, okay, and probably there's another one that goes off to the body as well, right? That's cool. And then this one will go down to the starter. Those are clearly big enough to carry that kind of current. And then also at the alternator, there is a big wire coming off of that one as well that goes over to the fuse box and then gets back around to the battery. Somehow, something like that, okay? Whether it goes down to the starter first, I can't remember. I didn't really look at the diagram that much, but it does get back to the battery. So as I'm looking at this, I'm like, and so I stuck my hand down there, and the alternator is hotter than a pistol. Hotter than a $2 pistol. Okay. And now, Auto 2 people, tell me, why is it hot? Okay. Anytime you think of heat with electrical, okay, this screams power. Okay. Wait a minute. But P equals IV, Mr. Groom. That's right. But Mr. Groom, you're saying there has to be a lot of power. That's right. That's why it's getting hot. Well, wait a minute. Voltage is 12. 12 is not a big number. That's right. That's because this thing right here is big. Are you with me? So, turns out there's a short inside the alternator. And what do I mean by that? This obviously is connected to the engine block with metal, obviously. And so this is how the ground gets back to the battery. Okay? Now think about this for a minute. You've got power coming through here. It's going straight through here, and it is going straight back to the battery. How much resistance is there? If it's all big wires, and then passing through the engine block, and then back to big wires again. None of that sounds very restrictive. Are you with me? So there is little to none resistance wise. So I pulled the cable off for a minute, and then I went and got one of our amp clamps. And the amp clamp, I showed you how that worked before, remember? And I put it around the ground cables. Doesn't matter, I could have put it around the positive ones too, but this one was easier to get at. And then I ran it over to my scope. And it read 120 amps. You read that right, 120 amps. You're like, that's a lot. Well, it is, but it's not. Like, for instance, it's a lot, but it's not in the case of, for instance, when we do starting. When you start a car, it takes a lot of current to start a car, because that's a lot of work to start a vehicle. Okay, so we'll be looking at that in the next few weeks. We're going to be looking at the starting system. We've looked at starters already. We're going to look at that current draw a little bit more, and then we'll also look at the charging system a little bit later on as well. But 120 amps. Now think about that for a minute. We know that V equals IR. We know this is 12. We know that this is 120. So we know that the resistance is somewhere in the ballpark of 0.01 ohms. Now what is 0.01s? Not much. That's why. Not much resistance. Not much resistance means ginormous current. Ginormous current means ginormous amounts of power, which means ouch, hot, right? So I went ahead and changed his alternator out. It was in a very tight location. Had to kind of squeeze it out like I was giving birth to like the engine was giving birth to the alternator. And when I got it out, it was so stupid. It flipped out of my hands when I got to the top, rolled over and hit the top of the dipstick and busted the top of the plastic dipstick off. I was so disgusted. So I had to buy him a new dipstick too. But I forgot to video it, didn't think about it. So I'm going to be making some videos in the next couple weeks regarding live demonstrations. And so we're going to be keeping track of those. So yeah, hope that helps you out. Hope you enjoyed the little story, I guess.